This video is sponsored by MPB 4x4 Independent Land Rover Specialists for all your new and used Land Rover parts from Bradford. Okay, boys and girls, we're going to do some chimpanzee spanner work today with a little bit of assistance from Steve, or Chimpanzee Steve. There he is, and Cobby, the friendly orangutan over there, using a hammer. Right, so Steve's pretty good with a hammer. He loves whacking things and taking discs off, as you can see. Happy that he's got that removed. And the orangutan mobile that we're working on is a Rover Sport with private plates, and it needs a set of front discs. The offside front wheel bearing has play in it, and we need to replace the whole hub assembly, which is fairly easy, using a puller to pull the hub off from the drive shaft. Watch out for the video, which will be a link here, and you can go and watch that as well. The vehicle is on a screw thread type ramp, which means it's not going to drop, and we're using ramp stands or axle stands to make sure we can get the wheels off and service the brakes. All the data comes from the workshop manual service procedures, which is found on a rave disc. If you're really hard up after owning a Range Rover Sport, I'm sure you could find one from a forum member who will give you a link to download it. Just to put it into perspective and credibility, the fitters in this video are all qualified technicians that work on DAF trucks. The brakes are the same, but they're bigger and powered by air instead of hydraulics. Right then, let's make a start on this old chugger. Firstly, you're going to have to take the wheel off to access the brakes. So I'll get the nuts off, take the wheel off, and put this lovely alloy safe out of the way. And then we've got a visual inspection on the disc to do first. You really want to take your wheels off every now and then and check your components, and one of these is measuring the brake discs. A new brake disc would be 30mm measurement, and maximum wear limit will be 28.4, which is less than 2mm across the disc of wear. This one is nearly 4mm. I don't know if you can see that, but this works out at 26 point something millimeters of wear. So this is coming off, and we'll be replacing the discs as a pair across the front axle. Land Rover recommend to measure it in 4 places, or 4 points on the disc, as you can see in the illustration here. Service limit is 28.4mm, and there should only be a variation of 0.01 of a millimeter between thicknesses of any of these points if it's within the service limit. The reason for this is if there's a variation in thickness, you will get brake judder. The disc supplied has minimum thickness 27mm, however the overall thickness is 30mm, so we're okay. The Range Rover Sport has pad wear indicators on the front pads, on the inboard pads, so we always change them for new. And of course you have anti-squeal shims for the pads, and these clips retainers for the caliper body. Okay, now with the pad set we have textile pads here, we have the clips, we have the the pads themselves, okay, and we have a set of new bolts with a thread lock on it for the sliders, and you'll be seeing that later on in the video. I'll leave you to decide which type of make of pads that you're going to fit to your Range Rover. We use textile because that's what the owner wants. The caliper design itself is caliper body, caliper carrier with slider pins. This is now a modern design that you find on almost every light and heavy vehicle. Minimum wear thickness of the wear material on the pad is 3mm, recommended by Land Rover. I can see here that this has still got a lot of life in these pads, however it's a disgusting waste because we cannot reuse them with new discs. Now these are slider pins. If you've never seen them before, this is a different type to Defenders. This is generally acceptable all the way through motor vehicles these days. They're more of an efficient brake when the pins are not seized. Okay, so the caliper body is bolted onto the slider pin, and you can see the nut turning there at the top of the slider pin, and I have to remove the bolt out of it. It is rather slim if you've got a slim spanner, but otherwise use a pair of mole grips like I did. Okay, once the bolts have been removed from the head of the slider pins, you can go ahead and lift off the caliper body. Right, so it's lifted straight off like so. Then make sure that you do not let it hang on the brake pipes. You put that out of the way and cable tie it up somewhere so it doesn't stretch the flexi brake pipes. This leaves us to be able to get the brake pads out, and they slide out like so. And once they're out, then we can go ahead and remove the carrier. Okay, so the carrier itself is bolted on by 2 bolts here, and there's no point in using a power gun. You need a breaker bar to get in there using a bi-hexagonal sock here. This one is 17mm, and I presume they're all the same size, and basically you need a little bit of grunt to take the pressure off first. If the bolt is tight all the way through, then you might well have problems. Obviously, once you've taken the pressure off and it's not tight, it should wind out clear. So that done, the bolts are out. We can then remove the carrier like so, remove the clips, and we'll have to clean the carrier out later. But what we have access to now is to get the disc off. This is retained by a retaining screw onto the hub, and using a T50, I think that says there, a T50 torque socket, and possibly an impact driver, we can go ahead and get this screw out. I did actually do this without an impact driver, just used a breaker bar. Cobby, on the other hand, he had a little bit of trouble and had to use an impact driver to remove the screw. As you can see here, once it's free and you've broken the torque off, it'll unwind. Right, so Steve's going to demonstrate very quickly with a hammer. A couple of taps and the disc comes off. All joy. However, on Cobby's side, this was a bit different. He had to lubricate it, tap it, keep tapping it until it broke the rust seal, and then the disc would come off. As we can see here, more gentle persuasion, and yep, that's come off no problem. Thing is, with these discs, they do tend to rust around the spigot. You also see the thickness of the disc here. It's thinner on one side than the other, so that's definitely time for change. Right, so the hub spigot itself, this needs to be cleaned, and so does the mating faces if they have corrosion and muck on them. You can see the hub's moving by itself because Cobby's working on the other side. So using a bit of emery cloth or a bit of sandpaper, wire brush, is get it round there and clean it thoroughly so there's no grit, rust or anything that is going to stop the disc from being true when we check it for run out. Okay, so the discs are handed left and right hand, and I have the left hand on here. You can see which way the grooves are cut, so that'll give you an idea how it's fitted. So what I'm doing now is just nipping up the disc to the hub so it's mated solidly, and we're going to do a run out test on this. Now, it's quite important for performance or faster vehicles that you don't have excessive run out on the discs, otherwise you will have brake problems. So now what I'm going to do here is show you the run out. It's using a dial gauge, and I've got that clamped up there on securely, and I've set it at 0. Basically what I'm doing is measuring with the dial gauge the amount of warpage, more than anything, on the disc. Now the figures here, which is 0.073 millimeters of run out maximum. If it exceeds this with a dial gauge, then the disc is either warped or there's crud trapped between the disc and the hub mating face. Either way, this test is actually quite vital that you should do every time you change your brake discs. Just make sure the torque setting for the retaining screw is correct before you go any further. Meanwhile, on the other side, of the sunny side of the vehicle, Cobby is with his son now removing the hub from the drive shaft, which is seized together. And back on this side we have the caliper carrier, which we're going to have to clean out. This is just good housekeeping to get the grot out of the grooves so we can make sure that the retaining clips fit in properly. You also have the slider pins, which you need to clean up and re-grease with brake slider pin grease. After that, they're fitted, and we should see that these move very, very smoothly without any restriction or too much slop. But basically, if these are seized, this will give you braking problems like you wouldn't believe. Either the pad will wear thin on one side, or it won't brake properly. Make sure these are clean before you bolt it back together. I would recommend putting a bit of thread lock on these bolts if you want. However, the torque setting is 110 Newton meters evenly, so the carrier is back onto the hub. So we should have something like this. Then we can go ahead and fit the spring retainers like so. Now basically these go in before the pads are slid in, and you make sure you get them round the right way. I'd advise always changing these because these brakes do get hot. Right, so we put a little bit of lubricant. This is a ceramic paste onto the clip edges. This will just help the pad sit in there. Just make sure you don't get that stuff all over your pads and your discs. So basically it's popping it in like so on one side, and then popping the pad in on the other side like so, and make sure you get them round the right way. Remembering to fit the anti-squeal shims, the original ones, to the new pads. Before fitting the caliper body, you need to push the pistons back into the caliper body and just make sure that the brake fluid in the reservoir is not spilling over at this point. And there's a little trick with a G-cramp and an old brake pad. It's just a matter of using the pressure of the G-cramp to pull back the pistons. Again, make sure your reservoir is not going to overspill as you push the pistons back into the body. We need to replace the bolts, or if not, make sure the ones you fit back are thread locked. So with the body back over the pads, we want to wind in these and then do them up. Basically, you have to hold the slider pin nut. And as I said before, I don't have a thin spanner to do this with, so I'm using a pair of mole grips and a 13mm spanner. You don't want to over tighten these bolts. They are at about 28 Newton meters. Don't forget to do both of the bolts. Of course, we need to fit in the pad sensor, which fits in on the inboard pad in the groove in the aperture there. And of course, it has a route to take up the vehicle and then onto the connectors. And on this cable, we have the full cable. And once it's started to behave itself, this is actually supported here by the bleed nipple. So we have a retainer here, pop that into place, and the nipple cap can go back on. What I've done here is basically follow the old cable route all the way up into there, and this is a real pig because the ABS sensor is also there. What you need to do is make sure you get the right connector and plug in your pad wear sensor. If not, the ECU will start screaming at you that it's missing. What happened, Cobby had thought that I'd finished, so he went ahead and put some copper slip on the mating faces. However, I came round to clean my disc with brake cleaner, because this is important. You can either do it when you get it out of the box, or after you've finished assembling. And I usually do it after I finish assembling, because then I've got all my greasy fingerprints off it as well. Right, so once that's in this state, we can get the wheel back on. Cobby is a qualified MOT tester, so he always checks everything, especially tyres and the mating surfaces of the wheel to hub. Now he's put another little bit of copper slip on there, which is right for an aluminium wheel onto steel. We pushed the pistons back so we could get the caliper body back over the pads, which are new. And now listen to exactly what I've got to say in the next piece. Remember that the brakes haven't been set yet, so I would advise that you pump the brake pedal to make sure you get the slack out of it before the engine's running or before you drive off. This is vitally important that you push the pistons out till they make contact and it's clamped the disc. You'll notice this on the foot brake pedal because it will go solid. This is with the engine not running. Now once you've got the wheels back on again, this nut gun is set under the torque. The wheel nut setting is actually 130 Newton meters for the wheel nuts, so you tighten them up, leave it half an hour, and then you re-torque them. So the hub here, this is the one that came off. The bearing is absolutely knackered, and this used to be quite a common problem with Range Rovers and Discoveries at one time, so I'm led to believe. So we fitted the whole unit, and I'll show you that in a different video. So Colby took the vehicle for a road test, and there's the thumbs up from the windscreen that everything is okay.